Great stories are timeless. To be a great storyteller, one must bridge the gap between an alluring narrative and the audience, to pull at the heartstrings and to shape the imagination. At Q Films Media, we're more than just a media production agency. We are a powerhouse of creative individuals, content creators, who specialize in telling great stories. Stories that are intimate and kept closest to the heart. Stories that are powerful and inspiring, that spark boldness and action. We are Q Films Media. We're here to tell your story. We are always on scene.
All right, we are back with the man, the myth. Sikandar, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Red light is still on, so
okay,
we are recording.
We're having some technical difficulties in here, so I don't know what's happening, but
I blame it on Kenny. I blame it on Kenny.
Yeah, Kenny.
It's ghost us, and all of a sudden things just go haywire.
Yeah, he should be here. Kenny, if you're listening to this, Sikandar wants you here.
Yeah,
right?
And Omen's got a giant photo of you on his desk, which is beautiful.
I miss you, man. I really miss you. But let's dive into, we dived in a little bit on the Moskers. I want to dive into next.
Let's do it.
Next Equities. Obviously, I have the privilege and honor to work with you on a week-to-week basis. And the team, the Kepler team, the press team. I want to quote something that you said, 3 years ago. That was on our podcast. But you were talking about kind of the industries that you have tapped into, with Next in the portfolio. And, Kenny asked you, how do you go about kind of like, when, a company comes to you and shows you the shiny golden portfolio and, the deals that come your way, you said that, deals that come your way are more like polished turds. Let's go find the hidden gems.
Yeah, agreed.
And so I want to know.
Very smart.
Yeah. I want to know what your criteria is in terms of finding that hidden gem, or what you kind of look for from your standpoint or the team standpoint in finding kind of those hidden gems.
Yeah, when we started looking at our investment approach back in 2015, it was kind of born out of necessity, right? Especially because a lot of the deal flow that you see here in Alberta is going to be in some way related to the energy sector. And 2015, was coming off of this period where you had historic highs in like 2012, 2013, 2014, and then all of a sudden you're entering into this period where oil was crashing and no one knew what the hell was going to happen moving next. And so we thought, okay, so many of these deals that we're seeing are related to the energy sector. They're going off of historic EBITDAs, which are incredibly high, and they're entering into this period of crazy uncertainty. So how do we find something that can still have substantial upside and value and some level of stability, despite the fact that the general economy in Alberta was kind of going topsy-turvy, right? So the approach we took was, okay, let's find spaces where there's maybe a lack of innovation, or at the very least, there's a lack of implementation of innovation, right? Maybe things have been done differently in other markets that just hasn't been adapted that way here in Edmonton or Alberta or Canada, whatever you want to say for the geographic scope. And then we said, okay, where can we actually add value, right? And not just through capital. That's not exciting to us. We're not just looking to park money and then watch it grow. We want to actually get our hands dirty. Like I mentioned, I grew up in an entrepreneurial and operational business environment. I'm not from a quant heavy finance background. Yes, like I did my MBA in that, and I worked at Goldman, and I have that knowledge. But my true like where I like to kind of get my hands dirty is on strategies, is on marketing, is on how do we figure out a way to implement new systems, new technologies, new processes to change the way people are thinking about some antiquated, what we call dinosaur industry, right? And so that really for us was like just a blank slate. We said, okay, start from scratch. What spaces are heavily lacking innovation? Usually those are spaces that have substantial fragmentation, right? You got tons of mom and pops who are so busy about just kind of taking care of tomorrow that they're not thinking about how do we innovate this space, right? And so that was our first kind of criteria. Okay, heavily fragmented spaces, right? Then kind of digging further, we thought, okay, where are there opportunities that are a little more recession-proof, right? Things that people have to be worried about regardless of whether or not, oil is at $50 or oil is at $150. Yes, everything is going to get impacted by that here in Alberta, right? But are there spaces that might have a little bit more stability despite that fact, right? And so that was kind of another thing that we were thinking about. And the third thing, as mentioned, the third kind of criteria was, can we add expertise to this business that go beyond just like adding financial acumen, right? So can we add operational expertise, marketing expertise, brand development, that sort of stuff? And so, in a lot of these fragmented spaces, so, press gallery with dry cleaning and commercial laundry, 90% of the time, these smaller mom and pop operations didn't even have didn't have a brand, right? It was like Joe's Cleaners, Bob's Cleaners, 59th Street Cleaners, 45th Street Cleaners, there's no brand. And then there was no, digital presence. Very few of them had a website. None of them had social media, So,
right.
So there was easy ways in which we could add a lot of value outside of just the capital. And then, the innovation was really the true trigger test for us is, can we do something differentiated in this marketplace that sets us apart from the rest?
No, I love that. And, take me back maybe to the initial, obviously I want to get into Kepler because
sure,
that,
let's do it.
Obviously
it's been a journey.
And January 2018, right?
First location.
First location. And now you're at 10.
Yeah, man.
Amazing.
We are at 10.
Yes, we. And first off, congrats, because that's an incredible feat. But take me back to the initial beginnings, man, of Kepler.
Yeah.
Like, what were the struggles, the challenges?
Oh my God, so many.
Maybe even touch on some of the small wins. Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, Kepler has been like a crazy ride, right? Like, so our initial philosophy was, let's identify businesses to acquire and then build off of those, right? So for about better part of 6 months, close to a year, throughout 2016, we identified, the childcare industry is one that kind of ticks the boxes, right? It's highly fragmented, huge opportunity that we thought to innovate. We thought there could be a lot more focus on STEM-based learning here in kind of Canada. We looked at other markets like the US, UK, Australia, where you had, larger, more sophisticated players that had scaled several locations with consistent quality care amongst multiple locations. Whereas here in Canada, you had, 98% of the market was like 1 to 2 location mom and pop businesses, right?
Right.
And so we thought, there's something here, right? If we could create something of high quality, high caliber, and then replicate it amongst multiple locations, we've already differentiated from the herd, right? And then if we really hone in on how do we actually add holistic value to the child and to the family, cognitive development, physiological development, nutritional development, et cetera, then again, you've created something that's highly differentiated from a lot of daycares that are out there that were just kind of honing in on one philosophy and oftentimes not even following that philosophy fully and that's calling it a day, right? So to kind of go back, originally we were thinking, let's find one to purchase, let's use it as our platform, let's use it as our operating partner, because myself and my colleague at the time, we had no background in early education. We didn't know the first thing about childcare, right? So we liked the space. We liked where we thought an opportunity could go, but we didn't have an operations background in early education. So we thought, let's buy one. Let's use that as our platform. Let's build it. And so for about 6 to 8 months, we spoke to probably over 100 independent childcare providers in the greater Edmonton area. And we really just couldn't find one that fit the niche the way we wanted to, right? We wanted to really find that unicorn that could be both business proficient as well as operationally proficient, and we just couldn't find one that made sense both ways. We came very close. In fact, we made an offer on one, and they actually turned us down on the last day.
Oh, wow.
We were in our lawyer's office ready to sign paperwork, and they didn't show up. They didn't show up to the meeting.
Oh, wow.
And it was literally the best thing that could have happened to us, because when they no-showed and we had a deal ready, like we had already signed the LOI, everything was ready. This was the final paperwork. When they no-showed, my colleague and I, we just looked at each other like, let's just do it ourselves, right? So that was that entrepreneurial spirit kicking in. And we, at that time, were already talking to a couple of people in the industry as kind of consultants. And we thought, let's just bring them on board full time, right? Let's build a team. Let's really hone in on how do we want to market this thing. Let's hone in on how do we want to develop a curriculum. Let's go speak to every expert we can speak to on developing a curriculum. So we spoke to like TELUS World of Science. We spoke to, there's a Mannix Foundation in Calgary. We spoke to them. We spoke to Harvard Center for Child Development. We spoke to all these like major resources to learn how do you create a curriculum that's truly like holistic in its education experience. And then we signed, we separately as well, like I had a bunch of buddies in New York who were in kind of brand building. And so worked very closely with them, came up with sort of the name, the logo, the look, the feel, everything. And everything was super intentional, right? From how we wanted to build the spaces to how we wanted to look, how we wanted our website to look, how we wanted to market ourselves, how we wanted to talk about ourselves, right? Very intentionally calling ourselves an academy, not a daycare, right? Calling them educators, not childcare workers, All these things were super intentional and even our names of our classrooms, we don't call them toddlers and pre-K, we call them explorers and navigators, right? So everything had a lot of thought behind it. And then, like you said, we opened our first location in January 2018. But I knew from day one, I said, this business doesn't make sense with less than 10 locations, because we wanted to hire the best of the best. We wanted to bring on board operational expertise, curriculum expertise, educational expertise that could only be supported with scale, right? You can't hire that firepower and pay them to just run one location. It doesn't make sense, right? And so we built the team first, right? At 3 locations, we had, Mary on board, who's probably one of the leading voices in childcare in the country. She was running 42 locations for the second largest player before she joined us. Right?
Incredible. Yeah.
We brought her on board. We brought a curriculum lead on board. We had an amazing marketing team already. We brought an HR lead on board. We had this entire infrastructure, and we had 3 locations, which was crazy. It was way too overstaffed, right? But it was intentional because we knew we had signed at that point already. In 2018, we had signed 7 more leases. We knew we were going to get to 10 locations, and come hell or high water, we were getting to 10 locations. So it was very, very, I guess, dumb, stupid, bold, whatever you want to call it. But we went for it right from day one, and not without its challenges, because sometimes you start running before you can walk and you stumble, right? And coming out of the gates, we probably did come out a little too hot, right? We weren't able to necessarily do everything as we wanted to, like as we were advertising. Like some of the curriculum aspect was falling behind, and we had a situation where at one point we had to have a real look in the mirror and say, okay, and this is before we had brought Mary on board, before we had all these other people on board. We said, okay, listen, if we actually want to do what we're saying we want to do, we've got to make that investment in people, right? And that's when we made these huge kind of substantial steps to build something that we could truly get really excited about and very proud about. And from that point forward, it's, sky's the limit. 3 years in a row, top choice. We're 98% filled across the board.
For sure.
1,400 children every day that come to Kepler Academy. So
it's incredible.
Yeah, man. It's been quite the story ever since.
No, for sure. And, I see it on a week-to-week basis, going through the Keplers and as a kid, back in my day, I would have loved a Kepler Academy. Sure. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
Just the way, again, not only from the brand, but just the child experience, the parent experience, the brand. Totally. You as not only a parent or just someone from the outside, you not only get that Kepler experience, but when you walk in the doors, when I see the children and everything's programmed, every like you said, everything is intentional. Mm-hmm. From the brand to the actual experience when you walk in those doors, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And it has to be, right?
Yeah.
Your brand consists of every aspect of the client experience, right? From the first moment you make a phone call to inquire about, what we're all about, to our our digital presence online, to the first time you walk through our front doors, to the smell of the location, like everything impacts your brand, right? And your reputation. And so that's why for us, you can't be unintentional around anything. Everything has to have a purpose. Everything has to have a reason for being. And we need to make sure we treat everything with a similar level of respect, right? Because if you have an amazing curriculum, but your place looks like absolute garbage, like no one's going to remember the curriculum. They're going to remember that your place looks like garbage.
Right.
Similarly, if your place looks pristine, but you've got no education, you've got no art on the wall, you've got no feeling of safety and comfort and security, then a parent is going to recognize that right away and run for the hills, right? So everything, and those are obviously two very obvious ones, but everything matters, right? Even the way the place smells. Like if it smells like muffins in the morning because our cook on site is making fresh, healthy muffins for the kids, like people notice. They notice right away.
For sure, and obviously you touched on the initial challenges. What are some of the challenges you see now? 10 locations in, few years into the game, obviously the initial struggles, well, you weren't as knowledgeable in the space.
Yeah.
You didn't invest in those people. What are some of the challenges you see right now with being at where you're at right now?
Yeah, the big one is that the landscape is changing. Right?
I was going to say, has the industry changed? The industry
has completely shifted over the last year and a half with the introduction of the new affordability grant, right? So it used to be, if you're under a certain household income, which was way too low, it was only like $75,000, $80,000, you would get some level of financial support from the government to assist with childcare, right? If you're above that, you're on your own, right? Over the last year and a half, and rightfully so, like as we are in favor of, the government, federal government, provincial government, all levels of government, decided that it was in the country's best interest to have more affordable daycare, right? So a lot of money has been poured in from the feds to assist with the pay of childcare for families, right? And so it happens in a few different ways. It happens through a grant that is administered through the government, and also they raise that subsidy level from 80 grand to like 180 grand, right? So that has been a huge shift because obviously now a lot more families can afford daycare, right? Which is amazing. It allows people to return to work for oftentimes, unfortunately, it's the mother who has to sacrifice her career, and so this allows parents who would like to return to work. It gives them that opportunity. Obviously, if you have no desire to return to work, that's great too. Yeah. And similarly, it gives more children, which we're fully on board with. It gives a lot more children an opportunity to get the experience that organizations like Kepler can offer, right? Not just, the socialization, which is obviously a huge component of early education, like socialization with other children and so on and so forth. But, the exposure to things like, with Kenny, we have a full jiu-jitsu program and, things like our STEM-based curriculum and things like nutrition program and all that sort of stuff, right? So we find it's a huge win at the end of the day. But the challenge is that obviously whenever government funds are involved, it drastically reduces how you can spend money and how much money you can spend, right? And so there is a bit of a period right now that we're going through of transition where we're still trying to hammer out what does this look like from a growth perspective? What does it even look like for our existing locations, right? Because kind of, for 2022 and for the first part of 2023, we've kind of been like stopgapped where, childcare centers essentially had to agree not to raise their rates past their, 2021 levels with a little bit of a inflation adjustment. And the government just kind of, wrote a check for families to reduce their fees accordingly, right? So, depending on how old your child is, you just got a flat amount, regardless of what daycare you go to. Every daycare had to come in to remove that amount of money off of the fees, right? Now, as we move into like 2020, later parts of 2023 and into 2024, there's a new formula being developed to determine how much funding you get from the government. And there's also going to be a requirement from daycares to agree not to charge families more than, $15 a day to start, and then eventually $10 a day. And there's also a level of, requirement around, what's covered and what's not covered. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, right? And so until we get that certainty, it's very difficult for us to know what our next step is going to be, right? Our intent was always to scale and to continue to grow and to add this, what we consider a really incredible service to communities outside of Edmonton even. And, we're looking obviously all over Alberta for that, and then beyond. But yeah, we're in such a period of transition for the industry right now in terms of who pays and how much they pay, that until we can figure that out, it's a little bit of wait and see. Yeah.
Before we jump into, some advice and some stuff that our audience could take away, I wanted to just quickly touch on the press gallery.
Sure.
Because I know that's a big piece in your portfolio. And, we've been working on it for the last, at least me being involved in the last year and a half. Talk to me how you're changing the game, especially in the industry of dry cleaning and laundry.
Yeah, it's not exactly the sexiest industry when you initially think about it, but again, like we were talking about earlier with Kepler, even, right? Like very similar type of circumstances that line up in that space as it did in the childcare space. Highly fragmented, very little brand, very little innovation. Big opportunity for someone to come in and try to do something a little different, right? So for us, the big thing there was how do we utilize technology to our advantage as well as to the consumer's advantage, right? So, one of the first things we did as soon as we bought the company, and in that situation, we did buy an existing company.
Yeah.
One of the first things we did was launch an app, right? And we launched an app with a developer out of Chicago, and the intent was, okay, we're going to have people essentially, rather than having to go to their neighborhood dry cleaner, you can just push a button, schedule a pickup and drop off wherever you are, and away you go, right? And so for years, we had an app, and then recently, as you know, we've pivoted to now do text message, and we have a web platform, right? And I think what we found is, like, as we iterated, as we went through it, is that, apps are something that people are getting a little bit more fatigued about, right? And so if we can remove the friction but still provide the same service, right, which is, a delivery-based pickup and drop off clothes cleaning service, and dry cleaning is at its core. But the other aspect of this, which we've evolved and we've had to realize, is that dry cleaning is dying, right? Fewer and fewer people wear suits to work every day.
Right.
And I think if you don't recognize that fact and you're a dry cleaner, you're going to be very quickly extinct. And so something that we've been talking about and something that we've been working on for quite some time is how do we start doing things that go above and beyond just dry clean only clothes, right? So how do we start doing specialty cleaning, right? Whether that's leathers and suedes and purses and shoes and all sorts of different textile-based garments. How do we get into that? And then how do we get into subscription laundry service, right? And, we've been kicking that around for years. I'm very confident that in the next month or two, we'll have a pretty substantial launch around that. But again, it's one of those things where it's like the only chore that people have yet to outsource, right? For whatever reason, you outsource your cooking, you outsource your driving, you outsource, cleaning at home a lot of times.
Yeah.
But for some reason, people still do their laundry all the time. And we've our thesis is that if we can create a value service that's convenient, that's cost effective, and that is able to provide a service, a quality of service that, is substantially better than doing it at home, well, then why wouldn't you outsource your laundry as well, right? And so subscription laundry is something that I think is going to be a huge opportunity for us as we move forward. But yeah, it's just constantly thinking about how do we innovate, how do we create technology, both for the consumer that's easier to use as an interface, as well as on our back end through automating our facility and our plant and all that fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that, man. And I think, I think, like you said, if you don't see the changes, if you're not constantly adapting or evolving, if you will, to the changes, and looking at other things such as specialty cleaning or doing stuff that's different, or at least going into the trend of the industry.
It's adapt or die, right? That's it.
Yeah, that's right. That's
all that matters.
Northern Fresh Farms.
Yes, sir. It's another
maybe
one.
let's touch on that vertical farm.
Yeah.
Maybe let's touch base on that just quickly. Maybe give the audience a little bit of
Sure.
backstory and where that idea came from and how it's going about.
Yeah, so this was, interesting way it fell into our lap a little bit. We actually had a building in Leduc, which we were just renting out. And we had a tenant in there, which was in the vertical farming space. And back in 2019, they were running into some financial difficulties. I think they weren't exactly focused on the actual business side of the equation, or a little distracted with other things. Long story short, they stopped paying rent for months and months and months. And we thought, okay, let's figure out a way to make it work with them. Let's cut a deal. Let's figure out, let's help them out a little bit. And so we had a deal lined up, and the day they were supposed to, essentially sign, it seems to be a recurring theme, but the day they were supposed to show up to actually make their first payment and sign that deal, they just didn't show up, to their own facility. They didn't show up, and no one showed up, and no one ever showed up after that.
Wow.
And so we were like, okay, well, what the hell do we do? This was the Western Canada at that time, and I think still was the largest hydroponic facility in Western Canada at 40,000 square feet, 600 grow beds, massive, right?
Yeah.
And they left all their equipment. That was the other thing. We're like, hey, where the hell are they, and what do we do with all this equipment?
Yeah.
And so initially we were thinking, well, we realized that the bank actually owned all the equipment. They didn't actually have much equity in there at all. And so initially we thought, okay, well, the bank will just liquidate this and we'll just lease up our space again. But, again, my dad was super entrepreneurial right till his last day. And he looked at it and he was like, why would we do that? Let's just do this ourselves, right? So, we've got the facility. We've built out so much infrastructure for these guys. We had to do all this plumbing and all this electricity work for them and all this stuff. And, we looked at it and thought, if we strip out all this equipment, if the bank strips it all out, it's going to be next to nothing, right? You're liquidating, assets like that. But in here, it's worth something. You've got an amazing facility that can actually grow high quality hydroponic, leafy greens and herbs and all sorts of stuff. And so yeah, we thought, let's do it ourselves. And so we made a deal with the bank. We took over all the equipment. And in 2021, my dad was leading the charge, and, his dream was to get it up and running and ready to go. Unfortunately, he passed away shortly after. So we jumped in and said, okay, let's continue and see what we can make of this. And so, now we've got an amazing facility. We've got amazing product. We've got all the certifications. We're ready to go.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting it into people's hands at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, no, and like I said, I'm honored to be a part of it, on a week to week, on a daily basis. So,
Totally.
Talking about that in terms of, obviously running a firm such as what you have, and in multiple different industries, obviously multiple different challenges and things that come about. How have you been able to, manage your time as an entrepreneur, right? As a person, and how your focus has, obviously it's a little split based on company, based on what's happening on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis. So how do you manage, or how do you operate as an entrepreneur with multiple companies, multiple ventures, but also keeping your eye on the ball of the market, looking at other innovative, ways of innovation, and having a vision for the companies? How do you balance the operations, the day-to-day, but also the vision and the direction of all the companies? How do you do it personally?
You have to have a good team, right? That's all it comes down to, is make sure the way I look at it, my job is two things: is assemble a senior level team that I can trust and that I think has the capability and acumen to actually do what they're being hired to do.
Yep. And
then provide them enough resources, whether that's through opportunity, whether that's through just their surrounding team, whatever they require, provide them those resources to actually go out and do their job, right? If I can do those two things, then I don't have to worry as much about crossing T's and dotting I's, right? I can let my operations team, I can let my marketing team, I can let my finance team, I can let my social and digital team go and make magic happen. And you know, the way I look at it, it's like I try to block as much noise for them as possible, right? So that they don't have to deal with, you know, the financing and the banks and all that nonsense. And, you know, and it also allows me to, rather than being so bogged down in the weeds, to start thinking about, okay, what can we do next, right? Like, what is the opportunity strategically for a company like Kepler in this environment? What is the opportunity for Press Gallery? And you know, we've got a whole bunch of different things that are in the fire. So like, there's all sorts of ways in which we can grow these businesses. And if I'm actually allowed to kind of take a step back and look at it from 10,000 feet, we can start to actually look at implementing some of those things. But I can only do that if I've got an operations team that I can trust, right? And I've got a sales team that I can trust. And I know that everybody's on the same page as it relates to what is the vision of these companies? What is our opportunity with each of these companies, right? And so, you know, that for me is the number one thing, because no one person can do it at all by themselves, right? Not even close. And if I didn't have someone like you, or someone like Mary, or someone like, Habib at most, and, keep that Press Gallery and Khurram running, all the technical stuff, and like, we've got almost 350 people on our team across our different companies, and that's who allows me to now look kind of at that high level to see where is the opportunity beyond the day-to-day.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What's your definition of success, brother? What do you see, for either, for the companies? And that, for me, it's like, it's easy to say, like, all right, like financially, that's obviously, that's a success, or whatever the case may be. But like for you, I've noticed that I feel like you focus more on impact.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? Impact and people. That's what I've learned from you. So I want to know what your definition of success is.
No, you hit the nail on the head. It's not a financial metric for me. For me, it truly is, can we leave a lasting legacy in literally everything that we're doing, right? With Moskers, with, each of these businesses, with, any community activity that I'm trying to do, how can we try to help people? How do we try to leave, something sustainable that can actually do good for the world beyond, a short kind of fragment of time, right? How do we create, whether it's jobs, right? Business opportunities for individuals, how do we create career paths for people? How do we create, ways in which we can change perceptions around Muslims? How do we do things that actually make a difference to society, rather than just, how do I line my pocket, right? Because it's so easy to just like park capital and watch it slowly grow over time, and, that's it, right?
Right.
But that's not at all. And again, obviously, like that's not the common scenario. I'm saying, like from a very privileged position. But like for me, that wouldn't be exciting even if I had that ability, right? And I don't have that ability. I'm still young in my career. I'm still like very much in the hustle mode of even like my own financial success, right? Sure. But even if I did, it would be a scenario whereby it would just not be exciting. You know, for me, it's about how do we actually create something? How do we make something that's impactful for those either involved or those who what we're doing is going to directly benefit, right? And that would be, for example, things like the Moskers.
Yeah. Man, I love that.
Yeah, man.
One, before we wrap up, there's going to be one or two more questions I have.
Sure.
But
Hit it.
What's something that people don't know about you? And what I mean by that is obviously everyone kind of knows the Moskers a little bit, kind of your career background and kind of that. But what's something that people don't know about you? Could be personal, could be business, could be relationships.
Yeah, that's a good
that you're willing to share, obviously.
Yeah, no, obviously. No, I don't know. I'm a pretty open book. I mean, I think the one thing that like, it's funny because I think people on the Moskers kind of know my business side, but people on my business side don't really know my creative side, right?
Yeah.
So it's always interesting. I always get like a raised eyebrow.
There's a halal gap there.
Yeah, I'm like, I also run this film festival, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, where did that come from? So that's always something that turns people's heads. But Yeah, if you kind of already know that side of me, I don't know, man. I'm pretty open book. I mean, recently got married. I guess people who don't know me, they might not know that. But I don't know. I'm pretty. I try to stay as rounded as possible and grounded as possible too, right? Like,
For sure.
You know, I'm not like I still play hockey 3 times a week. You know, I'm still involved with the Moskers. Like, I'm still obviously like trying to make sure that I've got time for my new wife and my family and all that stuff. So like, for me, it's more so about, you know, how do I balance those sides of my life rather than, you know, any secret passion project or anything that I'm working on the side, you know?
For sure. Is there any industry or anything that you've wanted to get into, but you just don't have the capacity right now?
Well, I mean, eventually I want to marry the two sides of my kind of day-to-day, right? Like, I want to find a way to executive produce something at some point where I can take my business acumen, I can take sort of the lessons that I've learned from the financial world and from, you know, the operation and the entrepreneurial side of my equation, and marry it with storytellers to find a way to better get their stories told, right? So that's something that, you know, kind of, if you were to ask me, like, personally, like 10 years, 15 years down the road, you know, if we've had some amazing successes and I'm able to kind of take more of a step back from the day-to-day of running these businesses, you know, if I had my way, I'd be working alongside people like you to say, okay, you've got an amazing opportunity, you've got an amazing project or story you want to tell or a project you're working on. How do we make it happen, right? Like, what are the roadways to get that done? Whether it's connections, whether it's financing, whether it's staying on budget, whether it's whatever, right? Like, what are the different lessons that I've learned through my career that I can help you with as someone who might not have that same background?
Man, I love that. Let's do it. Let's
make it happen.
Let's make a project. No, man. That's fantastic, man. No, seriously, Sikandar, man, I appreciate you. It's an honor to have you.
Always fun, man. Always fun.
In the studio. And I guess lastly, if anyone wants to connect with you, our audience wants to connect with you, you know, where can they find you? You know, plug yourself in.
Sure.
Obviously, check out the Halal Gap podcast.
Yes, please. Yeah, no, through the Moskers Film Festival, we have the Halal Gap podcast, which is available everywhere you find your podcasts. So please do check us out on that. We drop an episode every second Monday. For Moskers-related stuff, you can hit me up at sikandar@themoskers.com. For work-related stuff, you can hit me up at sikandar.atiq at nextequities.com. Next Equities is the name of our firm. So you're more than welcome to come to check out our website or anything that might pique your interest around any of our businesses. But yeah, for the Moskers, at Moskers Film Fest at pretty much all the different social medias.
Perfect. Last words? Anything before we wrap it up?
It's been fun, man. Go the Universal Radio Network.
Let's get it. All right, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for the conversation, man. I learned a lot.
Pleasure, bro.
And
And Kenny, we miss you.
We miss you, Kenny. All right, guys. That is a wrap with Sikandar Atiq. And make sure to tune in. Right now, we got Turn Up the Frequencies with TJ. He's got a beautiful mix coming up right after our last ad. And hope you guys have a great weekend.